When I called my son Malik to ask about his wedding, my daughter-in-law, Shanice, met my gaze with a chilling smile and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. Special people? For 3 years, I'd paid their $500 monthly rent, furnished their entire apartment, and stocked their refrigerator when they were struggling. Clearly, I wasn't considered special. I stood there in my own living room, clutching the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching Malik avoid my eyes while Shanice made herself comfortable on the sofa I'd bought them. The pale pink dress I'd painstakingly selected for her hung unworn in my closet, along with the new shoes and the shattered illusion of participating in my only son's most important day. I'd spent $200 on that dress, envisioning myself looking lovely in Malik's wedding photos in which I wouldn't appear. For weeks, I'd meticulously planned everything, setting aside $1,000 for a wedding gift, calling my sister Aunt Rochelle in Chicago to share the happy news, and thoroughly cleaning my house, anticipating a post-ceremony celebration with them. All of that crumbled in an instant, destroyed by those 4 cruelly delivered words. "Only special people." Malik finally looked up and mumbled, in a voice that sounded suspiciously rehearsed, "Mom, it was an intimate affair, very small, just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I saw the photos on social media, Shanice's parents beaming beside the happy couple, her siblings clinking champagne glasses, Shanice in her beautiful white dress, a dress I'd helped finance with the $800 I'd given her last month for personal expenses. I saw everything I was supposed to have missed. A week later, 7 days after that humiliating exclusion, Shanice called, her voice a stark contrast to the confident tone she'd used before. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Miss Evelyn, the rent is overdue. The landlord is threatening eviction if we don't pay this week. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled as if the world were ending. I remained silent for a moment, replaying all the times I'd rushed to the bank to make that transfer, canceling my own plans to ensure they had a roof over their heads, eating beans and rice so I could give them money for whatever they wanted. And now, after they deliberately excluded me from the most significant event of their lives, they had the nerve to call as if nothing had happened. "Shanice," I said, my calm surprising even myself, "didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear my own heart pounding like war drums, each beat a warning that the storm was only beginning. For the first time in years, it wasn't I who was trembling but she. "Miss Evelyn, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. All lies. Wrapped in that saccharine voice she reserved for when she needed something. The same voice she'd used to ask for money for the wedding dress, the honeymoon, the rings, all of which I'd helped finance, unaware I'd be excluded from the ceremony where they were exchanged. For years I'd lived in constant fear of upsetting them, carefully weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping for a mere crumb of affection from my own son. I'd been the perfect mother, the accommodating mother-in-law, the silent provider who never complained when they treated me as if I were invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," ignited something within me that had been dormant for far too long. I mentally calculated how much money I'd spent on them over those 3 years. Between rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and frivolous expenses, it was over $20,000. $20,000 I'd taken from my retirement savings, from the money my late husband had left me so I could live my twilight years in peace. And what had it all been for? To be treated like a stranger at my own son's wedding. That night, after hanging up, I sat on my bed and cried, but those weren't soft tears. They were fire-molten rage streaming down my cheeks, burning away the weakness I had carried for far too long. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, of pent-up frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for all the times they'd made me feel my love was a burden, my presence an inconvenience, my money the only thing of value I had to offer. I cried for the foolish mother I'd been, for the woman who'd lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who considered her expendable. When I woke up the next morning, something had shifted within me. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal. It was something deeper, colder. I looked in the bathroom mirror, the same tired eyes, the same wrinkles telling tales of years spent giving love without receiving it in return. But there was something new in my gaze. A hardness I didn't recognize. A steely determination that had been buried under years of compliance. I made coffee as I had every morning for 40 years. But this time I didn't think about calling Malik to ask how he'd slept. I didn't check my phone for an apologetic message. For the first time in a long time I was my own priority. I sat at the kitchen table, a table where I'd so often planned surprises for them, counted bills for their expenses, and wept silently when they treated me with indifference. Now this table would bear witness to something entirely different. I pulled out my checkbook and bank statements and began to calculate. I needed to see in precise numbers the extent of my own folly. $500 monthly rent multiplied by 36 months equaled $18,000. Food and supplies, roughly $200 a month, added another $7,200. Birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, anniversary gifts, at least $3,000. Shanice's medical emergencies, $800. Their car loan that they never repaid, $2,500. The air conditioner repair in their apartment, $600. The living room furniture, $1,200. The total, $33,400. That was the precise sum of my generosity. $33,400 I'd squandered from my husband's inheritance, my pension, the savings I'd meticulously accumulated over decades of honest work. All that money thrown away to keep two able-bodied adults comfortable, adults who couldn't even feign respect for me. The phone rang. It was Malik. Normally my heart would have leaped, hoping for an apology, an explanation, a reconciliation. But this time I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Finally it went to voicemail. I continued drinking my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later it rang again. Shanice. I let it ring. Then a text from Malik. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. I deleted the message without responding. At 2 p.m. I decided to go for a walk. I hadn't done that in months without a specific purpose, without an errand related to them. Always the bank for transfers, the supermarket for their groceries, the pharmacy for Shanice's medications. Today I walked simply because I wanted to. I passed the park where I'd often taken Malik as a child, remembering that sweet boy who'd hugged me tight and declared me the best mom in the world. When had he become this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When had I begun to confuse love with money? When had I started believing I had to buy my son's affection? At the bank, where I'd so often made automatic transfers, I paused at the door. Mr. Darnell, the branch manager, saw me and waved. He'd known me for years, processing every transfer to Malik and Shanice, witnessing my account dwindle month after month to replenish theirs. I went inside and went directly to his office. Mr. Darnell, I said, I need to cancel the automatic transfers. He looked at me surprised. For 3 years, these transfers had been as predictable as the sunrise. Are you sure, Miss Evelyn? Did something happen? His concern was genuine, more genuine than any Malik had shown me in recent months. What happened is that I finally opened my eyes, I replied. I want to cancel everything, and I also need information on how to better protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money. While Mr. Darnell processed the cancellations, my phone buzzed incessantly. Malik, Shanice, Malik again. It was as if they'd developed a radar to detect when their income stream was threatened. I turned off my phone completely. Miss Evelyn, Mr. Darnell said, handing me the paperwork. I apologize for intruding, but in all these years I've seen you be incredibly generous with your family. I hope you're not being pressured into these changes. His words deeply touched me. This man, who barely knew me beyond our bank transactions, showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son. I'm not being pressured, Mr. Darnell, I said. On the contrary, I've finally stopped pressuring myself. Leaving the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I'd shed an enormous burden. For the first time in years, my money was entirely my own. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource, not a person. I went home and reflected on all the things I'd sacrificed for Malik and Shanice. The trips I'd missed to save money for them, the friends I'd neglected because I was always available for their emergencies, the hobbies I'd abandoned because every dollar spent on myself was one less for their needs. When I arrived home, 3 cars were parked outside Malik's, Shanice's, and one I didn't recognize. I saw movement inside through the windows. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I'd given them keys because I trusted them, believing they'd one day care for me as I'd cared for them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first true confrontation of my new life. Opening the door, I saw a scene I'll never forget. Malik sat on my sofa, head in his hands. Shanice paced like a caged animal. An older man I didn't recognize was going through papers on my dining table. My papers, my personal documents. What is happening here? I asked, my voice stronger than I expected. All 3 of them looked at me as if I were the intruder. Shanice was the first to speak, her voice laced with the same desperate urgency I'd heard on the phone. Miss Evelyn, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Jamal is from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My situation? The question escaped my lips with a calmness that surprised me. What situation? I'm perfectly fine. Malik finally lifted his head. His eyes, once belonging to an innocent child, now reflecting only financial panic. Mom, we went to the bank, and they told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Darnell explained you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that. Mr. Jamal, a man in his 50s wearing a gray suit and a smile that didn't inspire confidence, approached with an outstretched hand. Miss Evelyn, I am Mr. Jamal, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being, and have asked me to assess the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I gathered my documents that he'd been reviewing without my permission. These are my private papers. You have no right to look at them without my consent. Mom, Malik interjected, using the condescending tone he perfected in recent years. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you financially cut us off without explanation. Then you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help. Shanice reached for my hand, her touch feigning the tenderness she reserved for moments when she needed something. Miss Evelyn, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm bell. Now I understood why they brought a lawyer. It wasn't about helping me. It was about declaring me mentally incompetent and seizing control of my finances. The same woman who told me they'd only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like a senile old woman. I am not confused, I said, my firmness silencing everyone. I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are leaving my house right now. Mr. Jamal interjected, his voice carefully calibrated for reasonability. Miss Evelyn, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? The laugh that escaped me was harsh, almost cruel. Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Deciding to no longer finance the lives of 2 adults who treat me like trash? Shanice leaped up as if I'd slapped her. We never treated you badly. You are part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We are just speeding up the process. There it was, the naked, unvarnished truth. Everything I owned would one day be theirs. In their minds, I was already dead, and they were merely collecting their inheritance early. It didn't matter if I had 70 years or 70 days left. To them, I was just a walking, talking ATM that had become problematic. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All 3 of you get out of my house. Malik stood. His face contorted with the angry petulance of a child denied his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations, the rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off like this. I can't? My voice rose for the first time in the conversation. Who says I can't? For years, I've paid rent that wasn't even in my name. I stocked a refrigerator in a house where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Jamal produced a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table. Miss Evelyn, we have prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Malik and Shanice to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary until you feel better. I took the folder and, without opening it, tossed it directly into the trash. The only transition happening here is yours. To the front door. Shanice began to cry, but these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of barely contained rage. You can't do this to us, Miss Evelyn. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial obligations because we knew we could count on you. Obligations based on my money, I replied. Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my companionship, just on my money. And now that I've decided my money is better used in my own life, I'm suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. Malik tried to approach, but I stepped back. He was no longer the boy who ran to me during nightmares. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle to a comfortable life financed by others. Mom, we made mistakes, he said. His voice intended to sound remorseful. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Shanice was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you just become reasonable again. Reasonable? The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger. It means pretending it doesn't hurt to have been excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. Mr. Jamal gathered his papers with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to rejection. Miss Evelyn, this is not over. Your family has legal options. If you are indeed making irrational decisions due to mental health problems, a judge can determine that you need guardianship. His words hit like a punch. I realized this wasn't just a manipulative family visit. It was a genuine legal threat. They wanted to declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs. Mr. Jamal, I said, meeting his gaze directly, I suggest you do your research thoroughly before you threaten a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who raised her son alone after the death of her husband, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who, until last week, financially supported two completely capable adults. Shanice stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally revealed her true face. This won't stay like this, Miss Evelyn. We have rights and lawyers too. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the lawyers you want. With your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums. The three of them walked to the door, their wounded dignity betraying their discomfort with being told no. Before leaving, Malik turned to me one last time. Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone, with no one to take care of you when you really need it. Malik, I said with deep sadness but also crystalline clarity, I am already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not by your neglect. As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I'd heard in years, the silence of freedom. That night I couldn't sleep, not from sadness or regret, but from the adrenaline of having reclaimed control of my life. I lay awake, planning my next steps like a general preparing for battle. If Malik and Shanice wanted a fight, I would give them a war. But a war fought with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 a.m. I was dressed and ready. My first stop was the office of Mr. Johnson, an attorney I'd met years ago when handling my husband's will. Unlike Mr. Jamal, Mr. Johnson had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting the rights of the elderly. Miss Evelyn, he said as I explained the situation, what your children tried to do yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation. His words were both reassuring and alarming. Reassuring because they confirmed I wasn't crazy, that what had happened was genuinely abusive. Alarming because I realized the situation was far more serious than I'd imagined. "We have to document everything," Mr. Johnson continued. "Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We will also amend your will to protect your assets from future attempts at manipulation." We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Johnson whistled when he saw the total $33,400 in 3 years. "Miss Evelyn," he said, "with this money you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding." Leaving Mr. Johnson's office, I had a plan. First, I would change all the locks on my house. Second, I would install a comprehensive security system with cameras. Third, I would open a new bank account at a different bank. And fourth, I would finally start living the life I'd postponed for years. My next stop was the hardware store. Mr. Tyrone, the owner, knew me well. I was always buying things to repair Malik and Shanice's apartment. This time was different. "Miss Evelyn, what brings you here today? Another emergency with your son?" he asked, with the familiarity of someone who'd silently witnessed my wasted generosity. "No, Mr. Tyrone," I said. "This time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks and I want the best quality." He looked at me surprised but didn't ask questions. While I was choosing locks, his son Darius, a security systems installer, stopped by. Felt like divine intervention. "Darius," I said, "I also need to install surveillance cameras, the complete system. Price is no object." While they prepared for installation the next day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Shanice, using someone else's phone because I'd blocked hers after yesterday's confrontation. "Miss Evelyn, it's Shanice. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults." "Speak," I said dryly. "Listen," she said. "I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Malik and I have talked about it and we want to make it up to you. How about we have a special dinner to celebrate our wedding with you? We can do it at your house. Cook together like we used to." The manipulation was so transparent, I almost laughed. "Shanice, how much rent do you owe exactly?" The silence on the other end confirmed I'd hit a nerve. Well, it's 2 months. $1,000 total. But I'm not just calling for that, Miss Evelyn. We really miss you in our lives." "Do you miss me or my money?" I asked directly. "Both," she replied. "Miss Evelyn, I won't lie. Yes, we need your financial help, but we love you too. You're important to us." "If I'm so important," I said, "why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why am I not important enough to get a call that doesn't ask for money? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing?" Another silence. We both knew the answer. Never. "Shanice, I'm only going to explain this to you once. For 3 years you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. You humiliated me. And finally, you insulted me in the most profoundly hurtful way. Now that the money is running out, you suddenly discover you love me. Miss Evelyn, please," she pleaded. "There is no please," I interrupted firmly. "You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to be at your wedding. Now I'm making mine." I hung up and completely powered down my phone. I didn't want any more interruptions on my day of liberation. That afternoon I went to the beauty salon, a place I hadn't visited in over a year. I'd consistently canceled appointments because Malik or Shanice needed something urgent, or because the money I had set aside for myself was suddenly rerouted to cover their emergencies. My favorite stylist, Keisha, greeted me warmly. "Miss Evelyn. What a surprise. I thought you had forgotten us." "I didn't forget you, Keisha," I replied. "I just forgot that I also deserve to be pampered. I treated myself to the works. A haircut, color, manicure and pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without a single pang of guilt." While Keisha worked on my hair, she shared stories about her life, her children, her aspirations. It was incredibly refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Malik and Shanice's incessant demands. "You look beautiful, Miss Evelyn," Keisha remarked when she finished. "But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen? Yes, Keisha, I answered. I finally learned to say no. When I arrived home that afternoon, an unfamiliar car sat in front of my house. My heart pounded for a moment, fearing Malik and Shanice had returned with reinforcements, but as I drew closer, I saw an older woman seated on my porch steps. Miss Evelyn? She inquired as I exited my car. Yes, that's me. Can I help you? I'm Eleanor Latoya. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never really had a chance to talk. Yesterday, I heard very loud voices coming from your house, and I got worried. Is everything all right? Her genuine concern deeply touched me. Here was a stranger who showed more interest in my well-being than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Latoya. I'll make you some coffee, and I'll tell you a story you won't believe. While I brewed coffee, I recounted the entire situation. Eleanor listened attentively, without interrupting, offering the occasional nod of understanding. When I finished, her eyes were brimming with tears. Miss Evelyn, she said, you did the right thing. I went through something very similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I too believed it was my duty to financially support her adult life. I too believed they wouldn't love me if I didn't give them money. What happened? I asked, eager to hear her story. I cut them off when I realized they only contacted me when they needed something. First, it was awful. They threatened me, emotionally blackmailed me, and tried to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, my daughter called to sincerely apologize. Now we have a truly loving relationship, one that isn't dependent on money. Her words instilled a sense of hope and confirmed I'd made the right decision. Do you think Malik and Shanice will understand someday? I asked, my voice laced with uncertainty. Maybe yes, maybe no, she answered honestly. But that's no longer your responsibility, Miss Evelyn. Your responsibility now is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without the nagging worry of whether Malik and Shanice had enough money for rent, food, or their frivolous desires. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and slept soundly, better than I had in years. The next day, Darius and Mr. Tyrone arrived at 8 a.m. to install a new security system and replace the locks. While they worked, my phone buzzed incessantly with calls from unknown numbers. Shanice was still desperately trying to reach me from various phones, but I developed a new skill, completely ignoring unwanted calls. Miss Evelyn, Darius said as he installed the cameras, this system will give you absolute peace of mind. You can see who's approaching your house from your phone, even when you're not here. And if anyone enters without permission, an alert is automatically sent to the police. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son, but the pain was significantly lessened. It was simply a practical measure to safeguard my newfound peace. While the security system was being installed, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Call my sister, Aunt Rochelle, in Chicago. We'd lost touch because every conversation invariably devolved into updates on Malik and Shanice's financial needs and my expenditures on their behalf. I now realized our conversations had been thinly veiled financial reports disguised as family news. Renee? Aunt Rochelle answered, surprised. Sister, how are you? We haven't spoken in months. I'm good, Aunt Rochelle, I replied. Better than good. I'm calling to tell you that I've finally come to my senses. I recounted the entire story from beginning to end. The secret wedding, the humiliation, the lawyer's visit, my decision to cut off financial support. Aunt Rochelle listened silently. When I finished, her response stunned me. Renee's sister, it was about time. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know how. What did you want to tell me? That Malik never spoke lovingly about you when I saw him at family gatherings. It was always, my mom helped me with this, or my mom bought me that, but never, I miss my mom, or I love my mom. It was as if you were a service provider, not a person. Her words hurt, but it was a necessary pain, like a doctor cleaning an infected wound, painful but essential for healing. You know what else I noticed? Aunt Rochelle continued. Shanice always spoke about you in the future tense. When Miss Evelyn is no longer here, we can remodel her house. Or when we inherit, we will invest in the business. As if they were waiting for you to die to truly live. This revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. They didn't just see me as an ATM. They saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and their inheritance. While I was striving to make them happy, they were meticulously planning their future without me. After hanging up with Aunt Rochelle, I sat in my kitchen, processing the avalanche of information. Years of marriage to a man who truly loved me, 35 years of raising my son alone after my husband's death, and 3 years of financially supporting 2 adults who viewed me as a 6-figure obstacle. The doorbell rang, and the new camera showed Eleanor approaching with a mug in her hands. I opened the door, and she handed me a freshly brewed cup of coffee. I thought you might need some company after everything you told me yesterday, she said with that genuine smile I'd already grown to appreciate. We sat in my living room, and Eleanor shared more details from her own experience. My daughter said the exact same things to me that Shanice says to you. You're like a second mom to me. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway. Those are rehearsed phrases, Miss Evelyn. They learned them from the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. Do you think such a handbook exists? I asked half-jokingly. Not officially, she replied. But it seems everyone reads from the same book. Chapter 1. Make her feel indispensable. Chapter 2. Create constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3. When she resists, question her mental health. We laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. It was both humorous and tragic to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. Did you ever feel guilty for cutting off the money? I asked Eleanor. Every single day for the first 3 months, she answered honestly. But then I started to see the results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started looking for extra work. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned that I was a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something I'd postponed for years. Visit my husband's grave. I'd always made excuses. Malik or Shanice needed something urgent, or the taxi fare would be better spent on one of their emergencies. The cemetery was serene and beautiful. Clarence's grave looked a bit neglected. I hadn't been there to tend to it in months. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and spoke to him as if he were alive. Clarence, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you left, I poured all my energy into Malik. I wanted to be the best mother in the world, thinking somehow he would grow up without a father, but I think in the process I forgot to be myself. Our son has become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this and I didn't want to see it. His wife. Well, you know how she is. The money you left for me to live peacefully, I spent it taking care of them. But not anymore, my love. I have learned. The wind gently blew and for a moment I felt like he was listening. I cleaned his grave, replaced the withered flowers with fresh ones, and stayed there for another hour, simply savoring the peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing home to solve a crisis for Malik and Shanice. When I got home, 3 cars were parked in front of my house. My heart pounded, but this time I was prepared. The cameras showed Malik, Shanice, and 2 unfamiliar individuals. Everyone seemed agitated, gesticulating and pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called Mr. Johnson, my lawyer. Mr. Johnson, they're at my house again. This time they've brought more people. What should I do? Don't get out of the car, Miss Evelyn. I'll be there immediately, and I'll call the police. After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. They're not allowed to be on your property. Minutes later, Mr. Johnson and 2 police patrol cars arrived. I watched the officers speak to Malik and Shanice. I saw my son gesticulating angrily. I saw Shanice crying again, but this time her tears didn't affect me. One of the officers approached my car. Ma'am, you can safely get out. Your visitors are leaving immediately. As I exited the car, Malik shouted from the street. Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son. Malik, I replied, my voice surprisingly calm. Family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into people's homes without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs. Shanice screamed from across the street. You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us like this. Mr. Johnson interjected. Miss Evelyn, any future communication must be through my office, and I suggest you consult with an attorney before making collection threats, because my client has full documentation of all the payments she voluntarily made for 3 years. I watched them drive away, defeated but not surrendering. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time in this situation I felt confident. I had professional help. I had emotional support from Eleanor. And most importantly, I had mental clarity about right and wrong. That night, Eleanor invited me to dinner at her house. I met her daughter, who was visiting, and saw firsthand what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully, genuinely inquired about each other's lives, and laughed together. Her daughter didn't once ask for money throughout the entire evening. I wanted that with Malik too, I confessed to Eleanor after her daughter left. And maybe you'll get it one day, she replied. But first he has to learn that you are a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income. For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The following days were surprisingly peaceful. The surveillance camera showed Malik and Shanice driving past my house several times a day, sometimes slowly, sometimes parking for a few minutes, but without exiting their vehicles. It was as if they were studying my routine, looking for the perfect moment to make their next move. Mr. Johnson had advised me to document each visit, so I meticulously kept a detailed log with the date and time. Their persistence will work in our favor, he'd said. Every time they show up after we've told them not to approach, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order. On Friday morning, while calmly enjoying breakfast, the doorbell rang. The camera showed a well-dressed young woman with a folder and a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but her posture indicated this wasn't a social call. Good morning, Miss Evelyn, she said as I opened the door. I'm a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We've received a report that you may be in a high-risk situation, and we need to conduct a wellness check. My blood ran cold. Malik and Shanice had escalated the situation. This was no longer just private legal threats. They'd involved the government. Can I see your ID? I asked, striving to remain calm. Of course. She presented an official-looking ID. I'm social worker Mrs. Schmidt. May I come in and speak with you? I let her in, knowing that refusal would have worsened my situation. Mrs. Schmidt sat down in my living room and pulled a form from her folder. Miss Evelyn, we've received reports that you've shown significant changes in your financial behavior, that you've cut off communication with your family, and that you've shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told that you've refused medical and legal help from your loved ones. Every word was carefully chosen to paint me as a mentally unstable elderly woman. I recognized Shanice's handiwork in the phrasing. She'd always been adept at manipulating words to achieve her goals. Miss Schmidt, I said with as much dignity as I could muster, I'd like to call my lawyer before answering any questions. Ma'am, this isn't a legal interrogation. It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem to speak with me. The phrase, if you have nothing to hide, enraged me. It was the same logic abusers used to justify their intrusions. If you're innocent, you shouldn't object to your privacy being violated. Miss Schmidt, I'm calling my lawyer. You can wait here or return another day. But I will not answer any questions without legal representation present. I called Mr. Johnson, and he arrived within 20 minutes. Upon seeing the social worker, his expression hardened. Miss Schmidt, he said after checking her ID, I hope you have a court order to be here, because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment. Sir, Mrs. Schmidt replied, her confidence waning, we have reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our duty to investigate. What family? Mr. Johnson asked dryly. The same family that tried to get her to sign a power of attorney without representation? The same family that broke into her house without permission and examined her private documents? The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money? Mr. Johnson retrieved a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. Here, I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. $33,400 withdrawn from her accounts in 3 years, systematic social exclusion, and emotional blackmail. If anyone needs to be investigated here, it's not my client. Mrs. Schmidt reviewed the documents with growing unease. It was evident that the information she'd received didn't align with the reality before her. Miss Evelyn, she finally said, can you explain why you so abruptly stopped financial support for your son? Because I finally discovered they were using me, I replied simply. Because I realized that to them I wasn't a mother but a bank account. Because I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle. But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family? The question infuriated me. Miss Schmidt, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he was 18, to educate him, and to give him the tools to be an independent adult. My son is 35 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility. It is my choice, and I have chosen not to do so anymore. Mr. Johnson interjected. Miss Schmidt, would you consider it normal for a 35-year-old adult to be unable to pay his own rent without the help of his 71-year-old mother? Mrs. Schmidt didn't immediately answer. I could see her reevaluating the entire situation. Miss Evelyn, she asked after a moment, do you manage your own finances completely? I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax payments. Everything is current and in order. Do you live independently? As you can see, I keep my house clean. I take care of myself physically. I drive my own car. I have healthy social relationships with my neighbors. Do you take any medication? Just vitamins and occasionally aspirin. I don't have any medical conditions that require medication. Mr. Johnson added, my client has just undergone extensive medical exams as part of our legal process. She is in perfect mental and physical condition. Mrs. Schmidt closed her folder. Miss Evelyn, she said, based on this conversation and the documentation I've reviewed, I see no indication that you are at risk or in need of intervention. I will close this case. After she left, Mr. Johnson and I sat in silence for a few minutes. Miss Evelyn, he finally said, this is going to continue to escalate. Malik and Shanice are spending money they don't have to hire professionals to try to have you declared incompetent. Does that mean they're desperate? It means exactly that. What else can they do? They can file a lawsuit for incompetence. It's expensive and hard to win. But if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify in their favor, they could get a guardian assigned. The thought terrified me. They could seize control of my finances. They could try, Mr. Johnson reassured me, but we have solid evidence that you are completely competent, and that they are motivated by greed, not genuine concern. That afternoon, I called Aunt Rochelle to vent. Sister, she said after hearing my story, do you notice how far they're willing to go for money? They're risking family relationships, spending money on lawyers and doctors, destroying their own reputations, all to regain access to your bank account. Her words gave me pause. Malik and Shanice had completely revealed their true natures. There was no going back, no possibility of genuine reconciliation. To them, I had never been a mother or a respected mother-in-law. I had always been a walking bank account. This revelation, though painful, was also liberating. I no longer had to question my decisions or feel guilty for protecting myself. They'd proven that my emotional and physical well-being was less important to them than my money. That evening, Eleanor arrived with a surprise. She'd invited her friends from the garden club to meet me. Miss Evelyn, she introduced me. These are my friends Keisha, who you already know from the salon, Tanisha, Shauna, and Miss Gladys. We've all been through similar situations with abusive family members. We spent the evening sharing stories. Tanisha had set boundaries with a brother who constantly asked for money. Shauna had severed ties with a daughter who only visited when she needed funds. Miss Gladys had had to revise her will after discovering her grandchildren considered her their retirement plan. What hurts me most, I confessed, is not losing the money I gave them, but realizing that I never had the love I thought I had. Repaid, Miss Gladys said with the wisdom of her 80 years. True love cannot be bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real. Her words were balm for my wounded soul. She was right. I'd bought attention, not love. I'd financed an illusion. You know what I've discovered? I said to my new friends. That loneliness surrounded by people who don't love you is worse than being alone. At least now, when I'm alone, I'm in good company. Everyone laughed, and we toasted to our newfound wisdom. That night, after my new friends had left, I sat in my garden contemplating. The stars shone brighter than ever, or perhaps I was seeing them with clearer eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely financially independent. I had no dependencies, no financial obligations to anyone but myself. And instead of fear, this reality excited me. I could travel whenever I wanted. I could remodel my house. I could buy myself beautiful clothes. I could donate to charities that were important to me. I could invest in my own future instead of financing the present of ungrateful people. Freedom tasted like hope, and for the first time in years I wanted to plan my future. A month after the social worker's visit, I felt I had finally won the war. I had settled into a beautiful routine, calmly enjoying breakfast and reading the newspaper, tending to my garden, having lunch with Eleanor or one of my new friends, and devoting my afternoons to activities I'd abandoned years ago. I had even started painting again. Something I was passionate about long before I became Malik and Shanice's personal financial manager. But one Thursday morning, while painting flowers at my new easel, Mr. Johnson arrived, his grim expression chilling me to the bone. Miss Evelyn, we need to talk. Malik and Shanice have filed a lawsuit in family court, claiming you're mentally incompetent. They're asking for a legal guardian to be appointed. The words hit me like a physical blow. I knew it was a possibility, but hearing it voiced made the terrifying reality sink in. Does that mean they can take control of my money? If a judge decides you can't manage your affairs, yes, he could appoint Malik as your legal guardian, giving him complete control of your finances. I sank heavily onto the sofa, the weight of the deepest betrayal of my life pressing down on me. My own son was attempting to legally declare me incompetent to steal my money. Mr. Johnson, what evidence could they possibly have? You've seen firsthand that I'm perfectly competent. They have statements from 3 witnesses claiming erratic behavior. They also submitted unpaid doctor's bills you supposedly didn't pay and medication you supposedly hoarded without taking it. But that's a lie. I don't have any outstanding doctor's bills or hoarded medications. I know, Renee, but they've fabricated convincing-sounding evidence. They also have a statement from Dr. Lehman stating you refused a psychiatric evaluation, which they're interpreting as proof of mental decline. The manipulation was insidious. They had twisted my refusal of an unnecessary exam into evidence of mental illness. They used my instinct to protect myself from them as proof I needed protecting. Who are the 3 witnesses? Mr. Johnson consulted his documents. Shanice, of course, a neighbor named Mr. Deschamps, and someone claiming to be your pharmacist, Mr. Andre. Mr. Deschamps was the unpleasant neighbor across the street, someone who'd always had issues with me because my friends sometimes parked in front of his house. Mr. Andre was indeed my pharmacist, but I couldn't fathom what he could have against me. I need to talk to Mr. Andre, I told Mr. Johnson. Something's not right. We went to the pharmacy that afternoon. Mr. Andre looked surprised and nervous. Miss Evelyn, it's good to see you. How are you, Mr. Andre? I was told you signed a statement saying I exhibit erratic behavior regarding my medications. His face flushed crimson. Miss Evelyn, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago asking about your medications. She said she was worried because you were acting strangely. And what did you tell her? I explained that you only buy vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you don't have any regular prescriptions. But she insisted this proved you weren't taking adequate care of your health. Mr. Johnson interjected. Mr. Andre, did you sign a paper? She brought a document saying I was confirming Miss Evelyn had irregular medication purchases. I thought it was for her health insurance or something. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit. My own pharmacist had been tricked into signing something he didn't fully understand. Shanice's manipulation knew no limits. Mr. Andre, I said, I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened and clarifying that I have no medication problems. Of course, Miss Evelyn. I am terribly sorry for this misunderstanding. After the pharmacy, we confronted Mr. Deschamps. He greeted us with palpable hostility. What do you want, Mr. Deschamps? Mr. Johnson said, I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. And you're right, I did. That woman is crazy. She's been acting strange for weeks. Can you be more specific about the behaviors you observed? Installing cameras as if she lived in a war zone, having strangers visit all the time, yelling at her family in the street. I realized Mr. Deschamps had taken everything completely out of context. The cameras were for protection. The strangers were my new friends. The yelling was me defending my house from Malik and Shanice's intrusions. Mr. Deschamps, I said, do you know why I installed the cameras? No, and I don't care. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law, who broke into my house without permission and threatened me. That's what a crazy person would say, he retorted cruelly. There was no reasoning with him. His statement was based on superficial observations, maliciously misinterpreted. That evening, Mr. Johnson and I planned our defense. Miss Evelyn, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Monique, who's an expert in assessing mental capacity. She can officially confirm you're completely competent. What if Malik and Shanice have bribed the judge? What if none of this matters because they've already decided to declare me incompetent? Renee, the legal system isn't perfect, but it's not entirely corrupt either. We have solid evidence of your mental competence and their financial motivations. We are going to fight this. The next day I saw Dr. Monique. She was a woman in her 50s with kind yet perceptive eyes. Miss Evelyn, I'm going to ask you a series of questions and tests to assess your mental capacity. Take your time and answer honestly. For 2 hours she quizzed me on my memory, reasoning, financial understanding, and emotional health. She administered cognitive tests and had me solve mathematical and logical problems. Miss Evelyn, she said at the end, your results are well above average for your age. You are not only mentally competent, but your cognitive function is excellent. Doctor, why do you think my family is doing this? Based on what you've told me and the documents I've reviewed, this seems to be a classic case of elder financial exploitation. Unfortunately, it's more common than people think. I left feeling validated yet saddened. The professional confirmation of my mental health was a relief, but it also confirmed the lawsuit's reality and necessity. That afternoon, Eleanor organized an emergency meeting with our garden club friends. When I told them about the lawsuit, everyone was outraged. Miss Evelyn, Tanisha said, we will testify in your favor. We've been with you for weeks, and anyone can see you're doing great. Better than great, Keisha added. You're clearer and stronger than many 40-year-old women I know. Miss Gladys, with her 80-year-old wisdom, took my hands. Miss Evelyn, my dear, what your children are doing is nothing new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare their parents insane to get their money. But you have something many of these victims didn't have. Documentation, legal support, and friends who can testify for you. Her words offered hope. I wasn't alone. I had an army of strong women who'd witnessed my transformation firsthand. You know what the saddest thing about all this is? I said. Malik and Shanice are willing to destroy any future possibility of reconciliation for money. Even if I were willing to forgive everything so far, there's no going back from this. And maybe that's for the best, Keisha replied. At least now you know exactly who they are, and you can act accordingly. That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I truly cried. Not from sadness but from grief. I said a final goodbye to the son I thought I had, to the dream of a loving family, to the illusion of reciprocated unconditional love. But something new also emerged. An iron determination not to let myself be stripped of my money, my dignity, or my freedom. The war had officially begun, but I was ready. The trial began 3 weeks later. I woke early, donned my best black suit, and looked in the mirror with an unwavering resolve I'd never known before. Today, not only my mental capacity would be judged, but my dignity, my right to live free from abuse, my value beyond my bank account. Mr. Johnson arrived at 7 a.m. to review our strategy. Miss Evelyn, remember, the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove you're incompetent. We just have to show that you are not. And what if the judge is already biased? Judge Harris has a reputation for fairness. I researched his past cases and he doesn't automatically favor families. He's dedicated to protecting the rights of the elderly. We arrived at the courthouse at 9 a.m. In the hallway, I saw Malik in a new suit, probably bought for the occasion, and Shanice dressed in black as if attending a funeral. Perhaps it was the funeral of our family relationship. When our eyes met, Malik avoided mine, but Shanice's cold stare confirmed this was just a business transaction for her. Their lawyer was an older, elegant man exuding the confidence of someone who'd won similar cases before. His opening statement made his strategy clear. Portray me as a confused old woman manipulated by strangers, alienated from her loving family. Your Honor, he said solemnly, Miss Evelyn has shown a clear mental decline in recent months. She has cut off all financial support for her family without rational explanation. She has installed unnecessary security systems due to paranoia, and has isolated herself from her loved ones under the influence of neighbors and lawyers, obviously taking advantage of her vulnerable situation. Every word was carefully chosen to make my self-empowerment sound like dementia and my freedom sound like external manipulation. Then they called their witnesses. Shanice testified first, delivering an Oscar-worthy performance. She cried, describing how I'd changed, becoming hostile and paranoid, isolating myself from the family that loved me. Your Honor, she said, trembling. Miss Evelyn has always been like a second mother to me. Seeing her mental decline has been devastating. We just want to help her get the care she needs. Lies wrapped in convincing tears. When Mr. Johnson cross-examined her, cracks appeared. Mrs. Schuster, can you tell the court when you last called my client without asking for money? Shanice stammered. Well, we always talked about many things. Can you give me a specific date? I don't remember exact dates. Is it true you and your husband got married without inviting my client? It was a very small ceremony. Is it true that when my client asked about the wedding, you told her you'd only invited special people? Shanice's face flushed. Those words were taken out of context. What would be the right context to tell your mother-in-law she's not a special person? She couldn't answer convincingly. Malik was next. Seeing him on the stand, swearing to tell the truth while preparing to lie about my mental health, was one of the most painful moments of my life. This was the boy I'd raised alone, the one I'd dedicated my life to. My mom has always been very generous with us, he testified. But lately, she has become erratic and irrational. We believe she is being manipulated by people who are taking advantage of her. When Mr. Johnson cross-examined him, the mask completely fell. Mr. Evelyn, how much money have you received from your mother in the last 3 years? I don't know the exact amount. Does $33,400 sound about right? Maybe she's always been generous. And how many times have you visited your mother without asking her for money? The silence was deafening. Is it true you and your wife broke into my client's house without permission and checked her private documents? We were worried about her. Is it true you brought a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney? We wanted to help her manage her finances. Do you, at 35 years old, need the help of your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent? Malik couldn't answer with dignity. Mr. Deshawn testified about my supposed erratic behaviors, but when Mr. Johnson asked for details, he admitted he'd never spoken to me directly. All his information was based on superficial observations. Dr. Carter testified that my refusal to undergo an evaluation was proof of mental decline. But Mr. Johnson submitted the documentation of my evaluation with Dr. Malik, completely refuting his conclusions. Then it was our turn. Mr. Johnson first called Mr. Andre, my pharmacist, who explained how he'd been tricked into signing a statement distorting my medication purchases. Dr. Malik testified about my excellent mental state and presented the flawless results of the cognitive tests. Mr. Tyrone from the hardware store testified about my mental competence, explaining that my decisions to cancel automatic transfers were completely rational and correctly processed. Eleanor and my garden club friends testified about my clarity, newfound vitality, and ability to maintain healthy social relationships. Finally, it was my turn. I stood with dignity, feeling the weight of 71 years of experience, wisdom gained through pain, strength discovered in adversity. Mr. Johnson guided me through my testimony, letting me tell my whole story. The $33,400 spent in 3 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the constant emotional manipulation, the violation of my privacy, the legal threats. Miss Evelyn, Mr. Johnson finally asked, "Why did you decide to stop financial support for your son and daughter-in-law?" "Because I finally understood that what I was getting from them was not love," I replied clearly and loudly. "It was a commercial transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but I, as a person, was not." "Do you regret your decision?" "I only regret that it took me so long to make it." Malik's lawyer tried to make me appear confused during his cross-examination, but I answered every question with clarity and precision. When he tried to imply my new friendships had manipulated me, I explained that, for the first time in years, I had relationships based on mutual respect, not financial interest. In his closing argument, Malik's lawyer insisted I was a victim of external manipulation. Mr. Johnson's rebuttal was devastating. "Your Honor, what we have seen here is not the case of an incompetent old woman, but that of a woman who has finally found the strength to free herself from years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs have presented no real medical evidence of mental incompetence. What they have presented is frustration because their source of income has decided to exercise her legal and moral right to protect her own resources." Judge Harris retired to deliberate for 2 hours that felt like 2 years. When he returned, his expression was serious but clear. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he began, "It is obvious to this court that Mrs. Renae Evelyn is in full possession of her mental faculties. Professional psychiatric evaluations confirm her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, as painful as they may be for her family, are completely rational and within her rights." My heart pounded. Furthermore, the judge continued, "The evidence suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest, rather than by genuine concern for Miss Evelyn's well-being. The court completely denies the request for guardianship. I had one. I didn't just win a lawsuit. I reclaimed my freedom, my dignity, and the unshakable truth that I would never again be shackled by those who wore the mask of love while wielding the knife of betrayal." When we left the courthouse, I saw Malik and Shanice arguing angrily with their lawyer. Shanice glared at me with pure hatred before walking away. Malik looked at me one last time, and for a second I saw what might have been regret, but it was too late. That night, Eleanor organized a celebration at my house with all our friends. We toasted justice, freedom, and the sisterhood of strong women who support each other. "Renata," Miss Gladys told me, "today you didn't just win a trial. You won back your life." She was right. For the first time in years, the future was entirely mine. I could travel, love, create, and live without fear, guilt, or manipulation. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved to a beautiful apartment near the city center. I donated half my money to organizations protecting the elderly from family abuse. With the other half, I began living the life I'd always wanted. I traveled through Europe, took art classes, and joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Malik and Shanice again. I heard from others that they had to move to a smaller apartment, and that Shanice had found a job for the first time in years. Perhaps adversity would teach them what my generosity never could: the value of honest work and independence. Some nights, looking at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago. Fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is dead. And in her place, someone has been born who understands a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. My name is Miss Evelyn. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I have to love and protect is myself. If you liked my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can write more stories. Thank you in advance. And you, what would you do in this person's place? I'd love to hear your opinion, so please share it with me in the comments. I'm always curious about what you all think. And also write me where you heard this story. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. With heartfelt greetings. Until next time,